Hi, and thanks for participating in my first ever American Issues Forum on Facebook and Twitter. I appreciate those of you that participated by submitting some questions for me, and I hope that we can continue this format. It maximizes the opportunities we have in our busy schedules to stay engaged with one another. It is, after all, the people's house, and I want to stay connected, and this is one way that we can do that. So a number of you have provided questions. We're going to run through those questions. I'll try to do my best to answer them for you and for anyone who wants to tap into to the website or to Facebook and get my response. The first question came on Facebook from Sid. Sid wants to know, what is my stance on gun bans and gun control in North Dakota? And Sid, I like the way you asked the question, because you said in North Dakota. And one of the things that I feel so strongly about is that many of the issues that come out of Washington, many of the solutions to challenges, to problems, and in some cases downright fabrications, they come out as one-size-fits-all solutions, and I don't believe in that. I believe that in the states' rights. I believe that every state is different in some ways. Some states are different in lots of ways. North Dakota is a state where guns are a part of our culture. Gun safety is a part of everyday life. And we have a different background, different culture than they do, say, in New York City or perhaps San Francisco. So I'm not much of an advocate for gun control, but I am an advocate for the Constitution and an advocate especially for the Second Amendment. I believe that the Second Amendment guarantees the continuance of all the other parts of our Constitution. North Dakotans are by and large common sense, solid citizens who know how to handle guns and know how to treat them with respect. I also believe strongly that this is a nation that was founded by people who, as we'll talk about in a little bit, are skeptics of our government and have a healthy skepticism of government. And we, as the federal government, ought not be looking at ways to diminish individual liberties and rights, but rather in terms of violence and guns, we ought to be looking at ways to enhance our culture, to encourage a quality of life that honors life. That we ought to be looking for solutions within our culture, not within the laws that we restrict, not the rights of criminals, but rather restrict the rights of law-abiding citizens. Dwayne asked the question. He says, what is your stand on the Keystone Pipeline, and what efforts will you put forth to get Secretary of State John Kerry to sign off on it, along with getting the President's approval? Oh my goodness, that's a great question. It's one I've lived with for a long time. As you maybe know, prior to being elected to Congress, I served nearly 10 years on the North Dakota Public Service Commission, where I carried the pipeline portfolio. I actually had oversight of the first Keystone Pipeline, 250 miles through green fields of eastern North Dakota, not even the Bakken, but rather eastern North Dakota. 600 landowners' land were crossed with the original Keystone Pipeline in North Dakota, crossed 2 scenic rivers, 8 counties, and in all of those miles, not a single inch of the Keystone Pipeline required condemnation or the taking of anyone's land against their desire, against their wishes. It was a matter of trusting the natural order of things. The corporate citizen working with the local landowners and the local citizens, working in tandem with counties and cities and municipal water supplies and environmental groups, and we were able to site that pipeline, and the result today is several 100,000 barrels of North American crude oil going to market right here in our country, enhancing the national security and the economic security of our own state and nation. I'm a strong proponent of the Keystone XL. I frankly thought a long time ago and continue to believe that TransCanada made a strategic error in choosing the route that they chose. They chose a route that was short in miles and direct, but wrought with lots of political challenges. As a result, it's been delayed far too long. There's no more time for the President to drag his feet. The State Department has found that there's no reason to not move on with the Keystone XL. It has been through many more rigorous tests than any other pipeline in the history of our country. It is time to have it approved. I've signed a letter that has been sent to the President indicating my encouragement to approve the presidential permit. I am prepared and have agreed to co-sponsor legislation that will make it law if the President and the Secretary of State don't act soon. So we need to have that pipeline built because America's national security and America's economic security are tied directly to our North American energy security. It will put people to work as well as bring troops home. So I'm a strong proponent and will do everything I can and continue to do everything I can as I did in my previous office. Ken Melgard has a question. He says, what if any are the current conversations around Washington about natural energy resources and the new EPA appointee, Gina McCarthy? Well, I don't know Ms. McCarthy. There's some concern that she will be an environmental extremist, that she's somehow a zealot for things. That wouldn't surprise me. I'm frankly not all that concerned about the appointee as I am about the appointer. Whether it's Lisa Jackson, the previous or the current EPA director, or Gina McCarthy, the soon-to-become, I suspect, EPA director, they're appointed by Barack Obama, who has stated quite emphatically his opposition to oil and gas development. Just recently in his State of the Union address, he on the one hand took credit for the growth in development of our oil and gas resources here in the United States, and then at the same time said he wants to form a new coalition or a new agency that would take oil and gas revenue, new oil and gas revenue, and use it to fund research to get trucks and cars weaned from oil. Now, I mean, how he got by without complete ridicule for a statement like that is beyond me, but it didn't escape me. In fact, when I first heard it, I had to go back to my office and look at the transcript to make sure I actually heard what he said, and he did in fact say that he wants to take new revenue from oil and gas development, apply it to research to help get cars and trucks off of oil. Now, that's the Jurassic Park economic model, not to mention there's nothing noble about that. And so it's his philosophy that's carried about by these appointees. It's not the appointees themselves. So I'm concerned about it. I think she needs to go through a rigorous, and will go through a rigorous, hearing process. But in the meantime, it is important that the Congress hold the EPA as well as the other regulatory bodies in check. I have signed off on an original co-sponsor of the REINS Act that attempts to rein in overzealous regulation. I continue to beat the drum. North Dakota is the best place in the world to do that from. Here we are, second in the country in oil production. Here we are, top producer of coal, have been producing coal for over 30 years, 30 million tons per year, 120,000 acres under permit of coal mines, generating 5,000 megawatts of electricity that makes us the 6th leading exporter of electricity generated by burning that coal. And yet we meet all ambient air quality standards as prescribed by the EPA because of our own primacy. While I was on the Public Service Commission, I also carried the coal portfolio. The reclamation laws in North Dakota are second to none. We had reclamation laws prior to the federal reclamation laws. We carry out the federal program with our state primacy in North Dakota and do it as well as anybody. So I appreciate the question and look forward to another election. But in the meantime, we have to live with Barack Obama as well as his appointees. All right, let's go to Twitter. Robert sent a tweet. He says, how important is passing a continuing resolution to end the sequester? Well, good question. And the reality is that the continuing resolution that we passed last week, in fact, incorporates the sequestration levels. But it does so in a little different fashion than the sequester itself. Just a little bit of history. The sequester was part of the negotiation last year between the members of Congress and President Obama. It was to be a threat, that is to say, an across-the-board cut of discretionary spending should they not work out a deal that makes common sense cuts along with other negotiations as part of getting our budget in order and getting, hopefully, our budget under control. Well, of course, they didn't do that. The sequester date was coming up on us at the end of the year. The last Congress was able to extend it by a few months by extending some revenue as well as some permanent cuts in taxes. That was good news. The president got about $600 billion in revenue that he was seeking in the form of permanent tax increases. Republicans got some permanent tax cuts. But in all of that, we have to remember there was also a 2% increase in payroll taxes. Every North Dakotan and every American that works and pays payroll taxes saw their taxes go up 2%. Well, the sequester then was coming up on us here, the sequester being the across-the-board cuts, should we not come up with a deal, and that those across-the-board cuts were allowed to go into effect. The across-the-board cuts represent 2.3% cut in discretionary spending. Now remember what I just said. There was a 2% increase in every person that pays payroll taxes in their taxes. I don't think it's too much to expect the federal government to find 2% cuts on behalf of those same people. The problem with the sequester is it was across the board, and that many things were left off the table, such as, and especially, the entitlement programs such as food stamps. Well, that means that a disproportionate number of the cuts were going to be on priority programs, especially the Department of Defense. So while the Republicans in the House and the Democrats in the Senate allowed sequestration to take place, those across-the-board cuts to take place, we had previously raised the debt ceiling for 3 months so that the debt ceiling would not become part of this sequestration and this year's budget negotiations. So to deal with the sequester in last week's continuing resolution, that is to say a budget that continues current spending levels as per current law, which, by the way, incorporates the $85 billion in cuts as per the sequestration through the rest of this fiscal year. That is to say, to September 30th. So we're short $85 billion. We find $85 billion in across-the-board cuts as per the sequestration, but then the continuing resolution funds the government at that level through September 30th. However, House Republicans were able, in our appropriations process, to include appropriations authorization for the Department of Defense, for military construction, and Veterans Affairs, so that the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration could prioritize the spending. In other words, while sequestration was across the board, we gave the flexibility back in the appropriations process to the Department of Defense and to Veterans Affairs, because those are top priorities for, I think, pretty much for everybody in Congress and in leadership. Certainly it is for the Republican House of Representatives. So we took away that non-discretionary spending cut that sequestration provided, and gave some flexibility to the people that know best how to prioritize. This is not a new concept for me. When I was on Governor Schaefer's cabinet for 4 years as tourism director and then 4 years as economic development director, the times in North Dakota were pretty lean. We didn't have the largesse we have today. We needed to reestablish a budget footing, if you will. We'd come off the doom and gloom years of the 1980s in a previous administration. And so Governor Schaefer asked every agency to come in with lower budgets, lower than 100%. We started at 95%, but he said you cannot cut across the board. Set priorities, prioritize every program, and then lop off the bottom 5%. That's what we did. It was an important exercise in prioritization, an important exercise in budgeting. It put North Dakota back on firm foundation. It sent signals into the investment community, into the marketplace. This is a place serious about getting its investment house in order, its budgetary house in order, its priorities of government in order. And look at what we have today. It built the foundation for the incredible economic opportunities that are presenting themselves in North Dakota today. So, great question, long answer, but it's a complicated factor. The fact is, now we're coming up on the real test. And that is, we have in the middle of May, or May 19th actually, we come up on the debt ceiling again. And between now and then, we'll be working hard in the House of Representatives for a long-term budget solution that prioritizes, that deals with the heavy lifting. And I'm about to answer a question for Camburn here related to this, but we're going to start dealing with the heavy lifting for reform of Medicare and Social Security so that we can sustain those programs well into the future. We need to strengthen them, preserve them, make sure that they're still there for seniors, and make sure they're still there for the middle-aged as well. So that's the heavy lifting between now and the middle of May. Maybe we can extend it a little more than that. But we're going to be looking at balancing our budget hopefully within 10 years. So we'll go to the next question on Twitter from Camburn, who asks, he says, Social Security has a $2.643 trillion in savings. Can we work to get other federal accounts to be this fiscally sound? And that's a big question. It's a big undertaking, Cam. And you're right, Social Security does have a balance right now of $2.643 trillion. However, beginning in 2010, we started spending more than we were taking in. In fact, according to the Social Security trustees, That's going to continue for a long time. Well, in fact, it's going to continue for the 75 years in projections that we have. In 2010, 2011, the shortfall was about $46 to $49 billion. Now, when you have that kind of a shortfall every year, and by the way, that's the first time since 1983 that we've had that kind of a shortfall, and now we're projected at about 66 this year and going forward through 2018 at that level, and then it becomes much steeper. And that's simply because there are so many more people in retirement and going into retirement as a result of the baby boom bubble than there are people paying into the system. So while Cam is right, we have a balance in the Social Security Trust Fund today. That will not continue. And I want to deal with that right now, because the sooner we deal with that, the less extreme the solution has to be. So, can we work to get other federal accounts to be this fiscally sound, Cam asks. And the answer is yes, we can, but the longer we wait, the more difficult it will be. Medicare is not on that firm of footing. Medicare becomes insolvent in about 11 years. Last year it was 12 years. Now it's 11 years. Next year it'll be 10 years. The longer we wait to deal with the shortfall in Medicare and then that fund, the much more painful that will be. Because if we don't deal with it now, and that is, and I support a plan that ensures Medicare as we know it today for anybody that's 56 years old and older. The problem with going below that is that we get bump on that date in 2013 or 2014 when it's insolvent. If we don't deal with that now, come that date, it's going to require nearly 25–26% in cuts just to keep it balanced. That's why there's urgency to dealing with these big federal spending issues. It's not that we don't like seniors. It's not that we want to create a private account or some sort of a privatized Social Security or Medicare. That's not it at all. We need to find cost containment solutions. We can do that and find those solutions and those savings well into the future to make sure we secure Social Security and Medicare for today's seniors, and then ensure its viability well into the future for tomorrow's seniors as well. So thanks for the question. Good question. I hope that you found the answers, if not satisfactory, at least somewhat understandable. Again, thanks for participating in my first ever American Issues Forum on Facebook and Twitter. I hope that it goes well and we can do many more in the future.